on the second part of the video for Unit 1A review worksheet number 1. This learning target, we're putting values in and then evaluating expressions. Just be very careful as we go through this that you're putting parentheses where they need to be. This says take x. Okay, so x is -5. So whenever I replace a variable, I'm going to get in the habit of putting it in parentheses. So that says -5 times, well, y squared. Well, y is actually -2. So again, in parentheses, squared, all over x. Okay, well, x we said was -5, and then we subtract 6. Okay, so if we do this problem, we realize, all right, well, what are we going to do first? We got to actually take and leave the -5 alone with our order of operations, but multiply by whatever that comes out to. Well, hopefully you've got by now that that's a +4. -2 times -2, +4. All over, okay, this says -5 minus 6. There's no multiplication here, guys. It's just a -5 minus 6. You really don't even need the parentheses. That comes out to -11. Okay, so if we keep working this way, we're going to get a -20 on top over -11. Never want to keep two negatives that way. So this is actually 20 over 11. That's as far as we can go. Fraction answer there. Okay, number 20 here. If x is 4, so let's look here. We have 2, and we're going to multiply by x. So again, we in parentheses 4, and then we're going to add 0, because that's y, 0 squared, minus, well, x is 4, and then y is 0. So minus x times y. Well, hopefully you're going to see that this is just going to come out to 8, because you're going to have 8 plus 0 squared is 0, minus anything times 0 is just 0. So really you're just going to have the number 8, an integer answer. All right, moving to the 21 here, some more practice. On the top, we're going to put it in parentheses, 4 squared, x squared, x is 4, and then we're going to have 6 plus, and then in parentheses, -6. Well, what's happening on top? That's just a +16. Not too concerned that you'll get that. I think you will. So 16 over, but on the bottom we get a 0. 6 plus -6 is 0. So this one, just so you're well aware, you can put this on your calculator. In fact, let me show you real quick. If I pull this up here, if I do 16 and I divide by 0, the calculator is going to say, whoa, can't do it. Cannot divide by 0. So just so you're aware, we can't divide by 0. So what we're going to say is just that there's maybe no solution. I'll accept that. Or undefined is a really good answer there. Undefined, since it's really an expression. But that's what I want you to understand. Okay? Now look at this next problem. What we're going to do is flip it now. So basically the x squared on the last one is going to the bottom. So let's look at this one. It's going to make the top 0 squared, and it's going to make the bottom 6 plus, and now my y value is actually 5 here. So this is going to end up being 0 on top, because 0 times 0 is 0, over 11. Well, now what happens if I go on my calculator and do 0 divided by 11 and hit enter here? Oh, that's 0, which is okay. 0 on top is fine. So just so you're aware, a 0 is the answer here. 0 over anything is actually 0. All right, moving along to the last page here. Absolute values now. Remember, absolute values, don't think about it as it's always positive. Think of it as distance from 0 on a number line. Got to get that mentality before you even attack these. If I have the number 0 here and I talk about the number 5, how far is it from 0? It's 5. So when I say absolute value of 5, I'm really saying how far is 5 from 0? Well, the answer would be 5. But what about how far is -5 from 0? Well, that's over here. How far is it? The same distance. So it's actually also a 5. So think about that concept when we go in here. Okay, so within number 23 here, we've had a lot of practice on this review worksheet with squaring negatives and the opposite of squaring. This is one of those where it's going to be -9 because it's not in parentheses. And then we're going to add to that 10 minus 2, which is 8. And then we're going to have the absolute value of -1, which is +1 based on our discussion we just talked about. -1 is a distance of 1 from 0 on a number line. All right, so this one here, we get this little negative hanging outside. You should know right now that your final answer is going to be negative. because there's a negative hanging out, and no matter what the inside is, it's going to be positive. So what we're doing here is we're like, all right, opposite of 4 squared, talked about that already in this worksheet, that's 16, minus 2 minus 1. Okay, so that's really just 1, and then squared. So working on the inside, we have the opposite of the absolute value of 16 minus, well, 1 squared is just 1. So going over here, we have the opposite of the absolute value of 15. Well, the absolute value of 15 is 15, but the opposite of that would be negative 15. So that would be the final answer, negative 15. So get out of your head the fact that if it's an absolute value problem, it can never be a negative answer. It can if there's a negative hanging outside. Like 25, all right? So looking here, I'm gonna go this one to save room. Opposite of, and then on the top, 8 times negative 2 is actually negative 16 on the top. And then on the bottom, if you can do all of this in one step, 3 squared is 9, plus 2 is actually 11, so we're getting a positive 11 on the bottom. Well, that's as far as we can go. And then, wait a minute, as far as simplifying that fraction, so what's the absolute value of negative 16 over 11? Positive 16 over 11, but we got to keep this negative going for the ride, so it's negative, opposite of 16 over 11. All right, last one here. In this learning target, we have the absolute value, and then in this bracket, we have 2 squared. So I'm going to take care of that right away, make it 4. But I'm going to slow down with the rest of it. Plus 3 times 6 minus, and then in parentheses there, that's actually a negative 6, because you do negative 2 minus 4. And then I have parentheses. This parenthesis closes off that parenthesis. Then I have to have a bracket to close off that bracket. Then I have to have an absolute value sign. So make sure everything matches on each side. All right, so taking this one a little slow. This one's a little intense here. 4 plus 3. Inside this parenthesis right now, I really have 6 minus a negative 6. So that's really 6 plus 6. Well, that's 12. So that number just becomes 12 inside there. So I'm going to close off the parenthesis, which makes that, and now all I need is the bracket and the absolute value. So now I have addition and I have multiplication. So hopefully you're deciding, you know that we're going to work with the multiplication first. So this is the absolute value of bracket 4 plus, and 3 times 12 is actually 36. Close the bracket, absolute value. And then that's going to be the absolute value of 40, which comes out to 40. All right, that's the one we were struggling with a little bit the other day, but hopefully you're feeling pretty good about that. All right, so rewrite into exponential form. This last learning target is pretty comfy. It's just basically look at the base. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 threes, but the base is 3. So you just rewrite it as the base of 3 raised to a power of 6. This is equivalent to that. It's the exact same thing. Okay, what would the answer be if I were to evaluate it? Well, that would mean that I would go to a calculator, and there's 2 ways to do this. But on this calculator I'm showing you here, we're just going to do 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. Make sure I have 6 threes up there, and I get 729. So the answer would be 729 if we were to evaluate it. Or put 3 raised to the 6th power in your calculator, and you'll get the same thing. All right, repeated multiplication for 28, you have to be careful. The base is negative 2. That is the number that you need to multiply by itself 4 times. Okay, it's not 2 with a negative out front. It's negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. All right, so that would be the answer in repeated multiplication. I'm going to take this slow. What's negative 2 times negative 2? 4 times negative 2 times negative 2 is actually 4. So this would actually be 16. And if you did this on your calc here, you would get a 16. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you? Wherever you are at, please realize I will help you with it. If you're not at a 10, I will help you with anything that will make you a 10. Okay? I really hope you, you drive to reach your potential this year, and I am here to help you with that, I promise.